We have an agency in the Division of Administration. They gave it a new name, but it used to be called the Office of Contractual Review. And I think everybody thought that the Office of Contractual Review reviewed all the contracts. I don't think they ever turned one down, but I think the myth was that they reviewed all the contracts. According to the legislative auditor, that's not accurate. According to the legislative auditor, OCR only reviews 7 of 20 contract types. According to the legislative auditor, the remaining 13 contract types, I'm reading from his report, represent 55% of all of the contracts and total $6.2 billion as of November 2014. In addition, he points out that the Office of Contractual Review delegates to many of the agencies the right to grant consulting contracts under $20,000 without being reviewed. These are called special delegation. As of 2014, 72 agencies had been given this right, and they had 4,599 contracts under $20,000, totaling $278.6 million. I'll talk about those in a second. You see them repeatedly, particularly at the Department of Education. Though I don't want to pick on DOE because there are many others that do it too. You'll see a contract for $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. So the bottom line is we have at least 18,710 contracts worth at least $35.8 billion. But as the legislature points, or the legislative auditor pointed out, nothing in state law requires all the entities to report all their contracts to the Office of Contractual Review. And if you go to the database at the Office of Contractual Review, which they call CFMS, all the contracts aren't in it. That's why I say we don't know how many we have. We know we at least have, according to the legislative auditor, 19,000 worth $36 billion. Point 2. If we can't find at least 1% or 2% or 3% savings in $36 billion, that requires you to believe that every penny of that $36 billion is being spent as it ought to be on what it ought to be spent on. If you can reduce that by 1%, you can do the math. That's $360 million. 2% would be 720. 3% would be over $1 billion. Point 3, the website. The website has been changed. I wrote the governor a letter about it. Used to be you could go on and track our transparency website and look these contracts up. And I wrote the governor a letter asking him why it had been changed. He wrote back and said it was changed last October and under the prior administration, and he would have it fixed by April 1, and I believe him. I do not know why it was changed. I know it's made it very possible for you and others in the public to be able to search contracts. You can no longer find the means of financing, whether it's state or federal money, and they pretty much eliminated the description, so you don't know what the contract is for. Whoever made that change in the Division of Administration is still at the Division of Administration. When an administration changes, the senior people change, but a lot of the people doing this stuff do not change. And I would strongly encourage you to find out who made this decision at the Division of Administration and ask them to come and testify why. Point 4. Last year, Representative Richard passed a bill that said that all state consulting contracts, it left out social service contracts, but we had to make some concessions. All state personal consulting and professional contracts worth $40,000 or more that were using state money that were that were discretionary, had to be reviewed by the Joint Legislative Committee on the Budget. As best I can tell, there were 992 such contracts involving state money. The Joint Legislative Committee on the Budget was allowed to review 0 of them, approve 0 of them, none. Someone at the division, my guess is they're still there, made the decision that every contract they looked at was non-discretionary, and therefore that didn't have to be reported to you. And I don't think that's in good faith. And I think that's wrong. It's certainly not your fault, but that's what you're facing with the bureaucracy when you deal with this issue. I was reading the bills y'all have filed the other night. Representative Richard has a bill that is going to remove the 40,000 limitation, remove the discretionary issue, add social services. I would like you to look at all of them. Doesn't mean you have to read all of them, doesn't mean you have to hold hearings on all of them. If you get 200 a month, they're listed, contract number, name of the consultant, amount of money, and a short description. If you don't have any questions, they're automatically approved. But if you do have some questions and think you can save some money, you should be given, in my opinion, the means to do that. I thought we had passed that bill. I would strongly encourage you, when you ask who at the division made this change that screwed up the track website, that you also ask to speak to the person that made the decision to keep you from having the right to approve those contracts. One other point. Many of these contracts have federal funds. I hear all the time, well, it's federal money. It doesn't count. Well, of course, it does count. It's federal taxpayer money. And Louisianians pay taxes, too, to the federal government. But I understand the point. You don't want to turn down federal money. However, many of these federal contracts, or contracts using federal money, could be given to our universities. Let me give you some examples. These are after-school tutoring contracts. $1.3 million, contract number 723510, with a group called Young Audiences of Louisiana. Contract number 723505, just one word, $720,000. Contract number 723340, $1.3 million. The consultant is New Orleans, South Africa. Contract number 724296, Urban Restoration Enhancement Corporation, $480,000. We also have after-school tutoring contracts with groups called God's Little Angels, Little People's Pay Station, Angels in Training, Open World Family Services. Now, you can't tell whether this is federal or state money because of the state contract website is in disarray, as I just discussed. But I'm willing to bet that there's a lot, if not all, federal money. I'm also willing to bet if you call the agency that let these contracts and ask them to see the metrics, okay, you've been giving $1.3 million to Young Audiences of Louisiana forever. Can you show me some metrics? Are they doing any good? I think you'll find there are no metrics. I also think these contracts ought to be offered to our universities, specifically our schools of education. The professors can administer the contract. Students can get academic credit for the contract. All the Board of Regents has to do is implement a regulation. I spoke to the Board of Regents staff last year about this time about implementing implementing a regulation. The Board of Regents that I spoke with were excited about it. The staff that I talked to, you would have thought that I had asked them to wash my car. They were not at all interested. And you should direct them to get interested.
Will you avail for some questions?
Can I just finish?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Number two, so I think a lot of this, I have spoken with one university president, and for reasons that are obvious, I won't use his name, who told me that he put together an after-school tutoring program for his school of education with his students and his faculty to get some of this money. He came to Baton Rouge. He was told, we don't need you. We already have our vendors. Now, he didn't make a big deal about it. This was about a year and a half ago. He didn't want to lose his job, and I understand that. But the point is, a lot of this federal money can be run through universities, and it will help the university, and we won't have to turn down the money. You can also, some of these social service contracts can be run through schools of social work. Also, I would point this out. Let's take this contract, $1.3 million. I'm assuming it's in New Orleans by the name of the group, New Orleans, South Africa. I don't know why we can't offer that money to the teachers. If you have teachers that are willing to stay after school and tutor those kids, they're already there. Why couldn't we take that federal money and offer to pay them by the hour? Or Matthew Block, the governor's executive counsel, who is a very fine lawyer, and when he was in private practice, to be calling these large contractors and asking for a discount. Now, many of you are very good business people. I mean, if you're a contractor and you're in a downturn and you get a little bit of work and the company that wants you to build the building for you squeezed you, you know what you're going to do. You're going to call your subs and you're going to say, guys and gals, the good news is we got some work. The bad news is you subs are going to cut your prices by 5 or 10% if you want it. That's what happens in the real world. To my knowledge, we're doing none of that. So I think some money could be saved there. I would like to see the governor send a letter to every one of our consultants and ask for a 5% discount. What harm can it do? Final point, and I do at some point because it's been suggested that I've not been specific and I don't have specific contracts. At some point, Mr. Chairman, I hope you'll allow me to read some of the record. I thank the governor for his interest in contracts. I don't agree with the procedure that he's using, as we have talked about. First of all, his executive order excludes specifically social service contracts. So he's not looking at all of them. I've read it 3 times. If they can show me that where I'm wrong, I'll be glad to admit it. Number 2, this is the procedure they've chosen. Contact every department in state government, tell those departments to send copies of their contracts that presumably they know about because they let them, to the Commissioner of Administration. He is supposed to read all of them. As he reads one that piques his interest, he's got to call the agency, arrange a meeting for them to come over and explain it. They're going to argue with him, and that's the way he's going to reduce these 19,000. I can assure you that he will be reading these contracts at the end of the governor's first term. He will never finish. That is not a reasonable approach, in my opinion. They will never get through them. If let's suppose you're CenturyLink, one of our few remaining Fortune 500 companies. You can't raise your prices because you live in a competitive world. Your competitors will steal your market share. You discover you have 19,000 consultants. Do you think the president and CEO of CenturyLink is going to call in all of his senior and middle managers and say, send me your contracts from these consultants, I'm going to read every one of them? Of course not. He's going to turn to those middle managers and senior managers and say, look, here's a figure, 5%, 3%, 2%. Go do it. And don't call a press conference and whine. Do it. And if one doesn't want to do it, he fires them. And I guarantee you it'll get done. It's nonsensical to me not to do it that way. You know, I don't think we're ever going to get our arms around these contracts until you get involved. And I would strongly encourage you to support legislation that will allow you to look at every single one of these contracts. And if you do, you will save some money, because you will find that some of these contracts are not as important as health care or education or infrastructure.
Representative Smith for a question.